I think this thing called the simple view of reading, which you actually see on the slide here, is just really a good place to kind of begin to understand the science of reading, which a lot of people are talking about today. It just kind of sums up what it is. And it's really important to say that the simple view of reading does not say that reading is simple. It's misunderstood in that way. It says that reading can be divided into these two different parts that end up connected to each other, but there are these two distinct pieces of it. And it was first proposed a really long time ago. It was actually 1986 by these researchers whose names are Philip Goff and William Tunmer. And they proposed it because they were trying to clarify the role of decoding in reading comprehension. Because everyone agrees that the goal of reading is to comprehend text. Like everyone agrees, there's no disagreement about that. But what people have been fighting about is, how does a little kid get there? What do you need to do to be able to get to the point where you can comprehend the text in front of you? So the simple view says that reading comprehension is the product of two things. So it's not the sum, it's actually the product, is a little multiplication here. So one is your ability to decode words. So you see a word like R-E-A-D-I-N-G, and you know that that string of letters represents the word reading. And then the other part of the equation is your language comprehension. So that's your ability to understand spoken language. So when someone's talking to you or when they're reading text out loud to you. So for example, when someone says to you, she's reading the book, you know what the verb means in that sentence, you know what she's doing. So what the simple view says is that if you have really good decoding skills, but you have very poor language comprehension skills, like you just don't know the meaning of that many words in spoken language, your reading comprehension is not going to be very good. And it also says that if you could have good language comprehension skills, but you have zero decoding skills, your reading comprehension's not going to be very good. In fact, it's going to be zero, because 0 times anything is 0. So the point is to look at how this applies to learning how to read. So most kids entering school have very little when it comes to the decoding part of the equation. They have 0 or close to 0 when it comes to the D in that simple view of reading. But they do have something when it comes to the language comprehension part. In other words, when kids enter school, they know the meaning of lots of words, but they don't know how to decode the words yet, which is why people familiar with the science of reading call for an emphasis on phonics instruction in the early grades. Because if the goal is to get to reading comprehension and you have a bunch of 5- and 6-year-olds sitting in front of you who have language comprehension skills but virtually no decoding skills, well, what do you need to do to help those children get to reading comprehension? You need to help those kids develop decoding skills. So what you want to focus on with little kids is getting their decoding skills up to the level of their language comprehension. Now, the simple view of reading clearly shows that if you focused only on decoding, that would be a really big mistake, because it's only half the equation. In fact, it's probably more than half the equation. And as everyone knows, the equation may not actually be divided into two neat parts. And as everyone knows, and this is very much about the conversation we're going to have today, kids come into school with very different language comprehension skills. Some kids know the meaning of like tons of words, and some kids don't. They have much smaller vocabularies. So reading instruction that aligns with the simple view has to focus on the language comprehension part of the equation too. So that means lessons, activities that expand children's oral vocabularies. So I give this as an example. I was in this first grade class in Oakland, and reading instruction was like intentionally aligned with the simple view of reading. So what was going on was there was explicit phonics instruction in one part of the reading instruction, and the kids were broken into groups depending on the level of their decoding skills, because kids are at very different places. And then another part of the reading instruction was explicit vocabulary lessons and lots of reading out loud by the teacher. And the words that the kids had learned were posted on cards all over the classroom, and they included these big words. These were first graders, and they were words like gigantic, neighborly, ridiculous, and extraordinary. And those are not the words that the vast majority of first graders are going to be able to decode, and they really shouldn't be expected to do that. But the first graders in this class were learning the pronunciation and meaning of those words so that when they're able to read them, they'll know what the words mean. And every single kid in this class spoke a language other than English at home. And in fact, several kids spoke English as their third language. So the simple view was proposed as a theoretical model back in 1986, and the basics of it have been confirmed over and over and over and over again since. The simple view is helpful because it disentangles the stuff that is most contentious in the debates about reading. So in the whole language view and in the balanced literacy view more recently, as Suzanne mentioned, the focus right from the start of reading instruction should be on getting kids to focus on the meaning of what they're reading. Whole language and balanced literacy are meaning emphasis approaches to reading instruction, as opposed to what's known as a code emphasis approach, which emphasizes decoding skills at the beginning of reading instruction. Early reading instruction that aligns with the science is a code emphasis approach so that kids can get to meaning. And everyone agrees that meaning is the goal. The question is, how does a little kid get there? So that's basically the simple view of reading and how it helps set up a conversation about what kids need to learn to be able to read.